Hello, Podmates! I'm Howie Severino and welcome to our new podcast series. Mga kwento ng kasaysayan na may koneksyon pa rin sa kasalukuyan. Enjoy listening! Noong 1937, nagbotohan ng mga babaeng Pilipino kung makakaboto sila sa halalan. Isang plebisito ang isinagawa para alamin kung nais ba nila ang karapatang ito. 300,000 yes votes ng mga babae ang kailangan para makaboto sila sa susunod na halalan. Ilang kababaihang Pilipino kaya ang sumuporta sa panukala? Sino yung beauty queen noon na nangampanya para sa karapatan ng mga babae? Sasagutin natin yan at marami pang katanungan.
Nung second day ng registration, nung first day, mababa yung bilang ng babae nag-register. Nung second day na, umabot ng around 500,000 yung babae na nag-register. So, tuntua na sila kasi malamang naman na maabot yung 300,000. So, finally, nung April 30, pagkatapos ng plebiscite at lumabas na yung resulta, around 447,000 yung nag-vote ng yes, and around 44,000 yung nag-vote ng no, and around mga 4,000 yung nag-abstain. So, tuwan-tuwa sila. So, sabi nga ni Pura Villanueva Kalaw doon sa kanyang akda na ito na yung pinakamaligayang araw ng aming buhay. Kasi nagtagumpay sila doon sa kanilang ipinaglalaban.
This is 1937.
37, yeah. April 30, 1937, yung after nung results ng plebiscite. Of course, mahalaga na kilalanin natin yung efforts ng ating mga suffragists, na kadalasan hindi naman na discuss ito sa Philippine history, itong part na ito ng ating kasaysayan. Pero sa pagbabasa ng mga dokumento tukol dito, na-realize ko na lalaki pa rin yung nabibigyan ng credit doon sa women's suffrage movement, doon sa tagumpay nila. Kasi, for example, si Manuel L. Quezon, parang siya yun talagang binibigyan ng credit dito kasi under his presidency, na ibigay, na allow yung kababaihan, at siya sa mga pictures, makikita mo talaga na si Quezon, yung sumuporta talaga dito sa mga kababayan. Although meron talagang mga lalaki na supporters, like yung mga mamabata, si Rafael Palma, Pedro Sison, Marcelo Bongcan, and of course yung mga American governors general natin, like si Francis Burton Harrison, Leonard Wood, Theodore Roosevelt, si Junior, and then Frank Murphy, mga sumuporta ito sa women's suffrage movement. Pero nakakalungkot lang na parang sila yung nag-take ng credit doon sa women's suffrage movement. Pero even yung mga suffragists, sila yung pinapasalamatan. Like itong book ni Encarnacion Alzona on the Filipino woman, dinedicate niya kay Quezon. Sabi niya, napakalaki ng ambag ni Quezon dun sa pag-enfranchise nga ng Filipino women. So, I think, dapat naman natin bigyan ng credit itong mga lalaki na sumuporta sa kanila, pero mas dapat natin kilalanin yung ambag ng ating kababaihan sa pakikipaglaban para sa pagboto.
So, sa mga kababaihan, sino dapat ang mabigyan ng credit sa kasaysayan?
Of course, Concepcion Felix, bilang nagtatag na unang asosasyong feminista, Pura Villanueva Kalaw, Pilar Hidalgo Lim, Sofia de Vera, yan ay ilan lamang sa mga may tuturing natin na mga talagang dapat kilalanin na nagkampanya para magkaroon ng karapatan sa pagboto ng kababaihan. And then, of course, si Maria Paz Mendoza Guason. Kasi ang ginawa nila, bukod sa naglalabi sila sa Congress, nag-publish sila ng women's magazines during that time. Yung Woman's Home, saka yung Woman's Home Journal, saka Woman's World. Pinapublish sila dito yung speeches nila, yung essays nila on bakit kailangan na bigyan ng karapatan sa pagboto ang kababaihan. And then, there was this quote from Dr. Maria Paz Mendoza Guason, na unang babaeng doktor naman natin na graduate dito sa Pilipinas, sa UP College of Med. Sabi niya, ang aking kusinero, ang aking driver na lalaki, ang aking hardinero, ay nakakaboto. Bakit ako, na babae na nagpapasweldo sa kanila at ang mga kapwa ko babae ay hindi mabigyan ng karapatan sa pagboto? So, yung realization niya na yun, siguro yun yung isa sa mga nag-udyok sa kanya para talagang maging aktibo dito sa kampanya, para mabigyan ng karapatan sa pagboto ang kababaihan.
Mahalagang yugto ito sa kasaysayan ng bansa. Pero isa rin pala ang Pilipinas sa nangunang bansa sa Asia sa pagbibigay karapatan sa kababaihan na makaboto.
Sa Asia, no, isa tayo dun sa mga leading countries talaga na unang nag-allow ng women's suffrage sa Pilipinas, no. 1924 I think Mongolia, and then 1932 Thailand, and then 1937 Pilipinas.
So nauna tayo sa China, Japan, Korea, all of those other countries you did not mention.
Yes.
Okay.
Nauna tayo sa Asia. Isa tayo sa mga unang nag-enfranchise sa women, no, dito sa Asia. So I think may pagmamalaki natin. And of course, sa West Asia, medyo late sila, no.
Hindi nagtagal, nagsimula na ring humawak ang mga kababaihan ng mga matataas na tungkulin sa gobyerno.
Agad na ipinakinabangan ng kababaihan yung karapatan sa pagboto, no, like 1937 nagkaroon na tayo ng first Filipina City Councilor, no, si Carmen Planas, no, sa Manila, no. 1937 December nagkaroon na agad ng elections for
kasi alam ko
local elections.
pinirmahan yung batas December ba or
kasi April yung
plebiscito.
Yung plebiscite. Oh. So
then,
I think September pinirmahan.
September yung batas. December may election
may local elections. Nagkaroon na agad.
Noong 1941, nahalal si Elisa Ochoa, ang kauna-unahang babae sa Kongreso. At ang first Filipino senator na luklok noong 1947, si Jeronima Pecson.
And of course, 1986, alam natin nagkaroon tayo ng unang babaeng pangulo, no, sa katauhan ni Cory Aquino. So, basically, masasabi natin na agad naman na nag-benefit, no, ang women dito sa pagkakamit ng karapatan sa pagboto noong 1937. No? Kasi may mga babae na tayo na naiupo, no, naihalal sa posisyon.
May utang na loob sila sa mga pioneer ng suffragist movement sa bansa, katulad ni Pura Villanueva Kalaw, asawa ng tanyag na journalist na si Teodoro M. Kalaw. Nakilala si Pura hindi lang dahil sa kanyang talino. Gusto ko lang banggitin na itong si Pura Villanueva, she was among the first feminists who were advocating the women's right to vote. Pero siya rin ang kinikilalang pinakaunang Miss Philippines. No?
Yes.
Beauty queen din siya. At the same time, she was this very prominent civic leader at a very young age. No? Early 20s pa siya nung naging leader siya nitong women's movement sa atin.
Yes, oo nga. Siya yung nanalo sa Manila. Siya yung unang Manila Carnival Queen, 1908. No? So talagang si Pura Villanueva Kalaw ay hahangaan mo siya, no, dahil hindi lamang matapang, hindi lamang matalino, no. Maganda pa siya at nanalo nga siya dito sa tinuturing na unang beauty pageant, no, sa Pilipinas.
Ang Manila Carnival Queen, ang kauna-unahang beauty contest sa bansa. Mas kilala na ito ngayon bilang Miss Philippines. Para mas makilala si Pura Villanueva Kalaw, makakasama natin ang kanyang apo sa tuhod, si Katrina Limcauco. I want to talk to you about your great-grandmother, your Lola Pura Kalaw, no? So tell me about her. What would you want others to know about her?
You know, she's known in history as the woman in the forefront of women's suffrage and all that. So I think that's what most people would know about her in history books. For me, I think I'd like people to know that there was other things aside from that, because not only was she civic-minded and she fought for the vote for the women, but she was also a successful businesswoman and, you know, was the reason why her family, she was the breadwinner of her family. And then even before that, she came from Iloilo and had the upbringing of a one of the finishing schools and of a very young lady. So it was a very, very, I thought, very different path that she forged just based from her Iloilo roots all the way to, women's suffrage.
Yeah. So she took a different path, no? So how different was it from other women of the time?
Well, she was born 1886. And at that time, women were sent to school to be a finishing school and to be married, and were taught to be good wives and all that. And I think because, well, one, she looked, she was half Spanish because her mother was full Spanish. So she came out, she was very tall, she was mestiza, she was very, so from the get-go, she was very unusual. And her father brought her up that way. He brought her up as like a tomboy, encouraged reading and schooling. And even though if she, there wasn't much education after that finishing school, she was at, I think, age 18 she already joined the newspaper to be a journalist or to be a writer, which was very unusual because, usually probably would get married or something. So here she was working for, I think, a rival newspaper of her father's, frankly. So that was very interesting. And so from that young age, at 18 years old, she was already very strong-minded. She already had her own opinions, and she was very liberal. So I think from that age, already it was a different road from most women at that time.
It would even be different today. At 18, you already have a column
Yes,
it was
yeah.
not a newspaper for her college or her school, no? It was a real
Oh, it was a
publication.
real newspaper. Yeah,
Oh.
definitely. She had an opinion column and everything. So
Yeah.
at 18, but at that time.
Yeah, and by age 20, she already had a reputation. And
Correct.
apparently she was already kind of famous
Hmm.
because as a
Right.
young woman achiever,
Yeah.
and at the same time, because she had mestiza looks, and apparently she was considered very attractive.
Yeah.
When she showed up in Manila to give a lecture, ang daming dumating, no?
Yeah, she was writing so much. So already her writings were quite popular. So she was known as a writer and an attractive writer, and could also orate. She could speak three languages, English, Spanish, and Visayan, I think, or Tagalog. So and then eventually Tagalog when she married. So yeah, you have this tall, attractive mestiza, gracious with all the education of a well brought up lady, who speaks three languages. Of course, she's unusual and she would attract attention.
Yeah, and at that lecture in Manila that attracted newspaper people to cover the lecture, in the crowd was her future husband, your great grandfather, no, Teodoro
Yeah.
M. Kalaw, who already had a reputation as well, no, as
Yes.
a
Yeah.
as a rising newspaper editor, journalist, and journalists were also kind of celebrities at that time, diba?
Yes, they were. Yeah.
Oo, wala pa mga TV personalities or news anchors noon. Yung mga periodista, sila yung mga sikat na journalists noon, no? And
Very, very well
apparently
respected also. Yeah. And
that
he was
that
the editor. Yeah.
that's right, and he was kind of smitten back
Well,
then, no? So
there was rumors that he was seeing someone at the same time, and then he met Pura. So I don't know what happened there. I guess
well,
he's
that's why. I mean, that's what happens when you're smitten, diba? You kind of forget everyone else.
well. My Lola makes it out as, of course, my PVK Pura was very beautiful, but it really was more a love match of the minds because they were both intellectuals and they both, they could converse for hours. He would there was some stories about him visiting her and they would sit in that window of the second floor and people would see him and they would just be talking. It was really, he found her such a great conversationalist. And it doesn't hurt that she was beautiful also, right? So that's, I think, what really attracted him. I mean, because I think he was seeing other beautiful women, but as I said, my great grandmother is outspoken, independent-minded, liberal, and eloquent. So that's what I think he found very interesting.
Sabi mo nga, they had a kind of a meeting of minds, but at the same time, they came from two different worlds,
Very, very
diba?
different.
Your great grandmother came from an elite family in Iloilo. They were quite wealthy there, and Teodoro Calao, I mean, they were not poor in Batangas. I mean, his father was kind of the equivalent of the town mayor of Lipa.
Yes, Valeria.
But si Valerio. However, they were not considered on the same level in terms of wealth and elite status as
Well,
the Villanuevas in Iloilo.
well, I think TM Calao was portrayed as just a poor newspaperman. I mean, like his family may have been elite in Lipa, which, Valeria Kala was, yes, he was the personality there. But in terms of himself, his profession was just a writer and a newspaperman. And it's not like a doctor or a lawyer, just those elite professions back then. While on her end, yes, the Villanuevas were quite well off in Iloilo, but her mother was actually not well looked upon by the Villanuevas. So I think she grew up not feeling wealthy, So I don't think she had that elitista air. And it's just, from my conjecture, it's because she was brought up so simply by her mother, by her Spanish mother. So maybe there, yes, there was a meeting of minds, and at least there was no horrific reaction to someone wealthy versus someone who's not wealthy, because I don't think they saw each other as that.
Yeah, but at the same time, there was some opposition from Pura's family, di ba? Because of that. Well, aside from the fact that, he comes from Luzon in
Yes,
general, I mean,
yes,
I'm sure someone like Pura, being kind of, I'm sure she was like the Niña Bonita of her family, beautiful and
yes,
smart and all of that. They would have wanted her to stay home
of
and
course, of
marry
course.
some rich Ilonggo, di ba?
Yeah,
And stay close to home and
yeah.
bear Ilonggo children. But, di ba?
Yeah,
And then,
they were very clannish in this in Iloilo, right? So yes, the fact that she was going to marry a Batangueño who was dark, who was small, right? So, all the racism comes in. But, she was headstrong. She was headstrong, and maybe that's why they had such a simple wedding comparatively to her sister who married the chosen suitor that her father wanted. She had a grand wedding. Pura's wedding was so simple. I think they just, it was dawn wedding and just family or something.
maituturing na ahead of her time si Pura Villanueva Kalaw. Natatangi rin siya pagdating sa kanyang papel bilang asawa at magulang.
My Lola was only 12, but she did say that Lola, she would call her Inay. Inay was really, really, I guess the modern word would be fierce. I mean, she was strong. She was not a cuddly Lola. She was, how you have these sweet old ladies and all that. No, she was quite strong. She was, and even in the book, she said, my grandchildren, I don't want to get close to them because they'll just leave me. So that was the impression. She was very strong. She was very disciplined, and everybody fell in line. You could tell that she was the one who, I guess, called the shots in the family because the Lolo Deroy, that's TM Kalaw, was a very, very mild gentleman, as my tita, my Lola would say. He was very gentle. He was very soft spoken. So, and I guess maybe life is just easier to just let the fierce half Spaniard have her way. And it's like she really I guess from reading the book, Howie, you could see that she really took care of all aspects of family life there, from the kids' upbringing to the business, to what they ate, to the schooling, to what they wore. She even made their clothes. She was just so hands-on with everything. Just so that TM Kalo could really focus on his political career, his House of Representatives, and everything, all that. So she really just let him have his space. So she took care of everything at the back end.
So earlier, you called her the family breadwinner, but it's not like TM Kala was unemployed, right? I
No,
mean,
no, not at all. Not
yun
at
na
all.
nga, no? So usually pag sinabing breadwinner, na, it's there's the spouse is at home taking care of children, but in
No,
this
no,
case,
no,
both of
definitely.
them,
He
yeah,
did go to office. He had a monthly salary, but as I think I read in one of the stories, he had such a soft heart that she had to go, during payday, go to his office to get the salary because he might lend it out immediately. So she was making, so I guess maybe not breadwinner, but she was the one who controlled the finances. So, and then her own business of real estate, I think that's what really brought in the wealth because, I think she really was so successful there, starting with selling her house the one that her mother gave her as a wedding gift. It was a grand house. So she sold it, and that was the capital. And she bought all the other real estates and built houses and rented them out.
Yeah,
So I
well,
think that's what built it. Yeah.
she was an early developer, no? And
She was an early developer.
yeah, land investor. Kasi she was investing in land around Metro Manila, which is now considered prime real estate. No, she had property along Rojas Boulevard, facing Manila Bay. I think parts of Quezon City. She was
Yeah, there's a
also.
Quezon City up there in Tierra Pura. That's named Tierra Pura. Yeah, and this is all, I think, debt free. It was really just take what you have, buy what you can, make it grow. Take what you have, buy more what you can. She left, when she passed away, there were no debts. All titles were clean. At least is what my Lola said. So everything was just clean to her kids.
Yeah, I think what you really meant by calling her the breadwinner is that TM Kalaw, of course, was a prominent employee of the government, public servant, and all that. But I think he was typical of a lot of bureaucrats and government workers at that time. He was honest, no? Hindi pa masyadong uso yata yung corruption noon.
I think, yeah.
So if you worked in the government, there was an assumption that you really lived on your salary, no, and nothing else. And now as then, no, government salaries don't really compete with the private sector with wealthy business people, no. So parang I think that's what you really meant, and I think to raise a family, a growing family, and if you want to educate them well, you really have to make more. You have to have more income than what a government employee would bring in, because TM Kalaw was a government employee most of his life, right?
Yes, he was. Correct. Agree.
She was busy raising kids. She was busy with her businesses, going around inspecting construction projects. So she wasn't just buying land, she was building. She was a builder, no? So how did she get involved in the women's suffrage movement? I mean, how did she find time to do that on top of everything else?
Well, what I understand is that during those early years of marriage, she had to let go her activity. Before that, she was always, before she got married, she was always asked to be the president of the women's movement. She was always asked to give speeches, always in the forefront. And then when she got married and she had to, I guess, buckle down and raise the family, she let go of all her positions and took a back seat. It was only when she felt a little more stable and the kids were already grown, and maybe my Lola was about, I think, 7 years old when she started again. I guess those first early years were so hard because it was shock. Her husband was amputated. She had to sell her house. Although according to my tita, I was going, it must have been hard for her to sell her house that was given to her by her mother. And then my tita or my Lola said, no, she made it a point never to get attached to any property. So she was okay to sell it. Very, very practical. Anyway, so it was only in her later years in her marriage, after she felt stable, was that she started getting active. So joining these, I think at that time there were many women's organizations popping up left and right, and she was organizing all of them, starting to take a leadership role again.
When did her interest in women's suffrage begin? Was this something that she was already advocating as a young newspaper columnist?
Of course, yeah.
She was an early feminist, no?
Yes. As I said, as early as 20 years old, she was already writing. She was a known writer for the newspaper in Iloilo, and she was already writing about how the women of that day were already so much more educated than the Maria Clara stereotype of Jose Rizal. More engaged, more interested in communities. As I said, as soon as her family was stable, she got back into public speaking. She got back into writing. The bill for women's vote, was passed rejected several times, Senate, House, blah, blah, blah. And she would always be one of the speakers for it. You know, they'd always call her as one of the resource or the advocates for it. So she was already giving speeches to the House of Representatives and the Senate for women's voting. So yeah, she never gave up. I think the first time women's vote ever came in as a bill was, I think, 1918. I think she was already asked to speak on it. So from 1918 to 1936, she was always speaking and writing and speaking to organizations, organizing the women. So you can imagine at 1937, when it finally passed, she must have been so happy. And I remember one of the anecdotes was that she found out that because there was a nationwide plebiscite, right, about women, you know, that we had to vote, and Iloilo gave in the second largest number of yes votes, and she was like, that's my hood.
Ang anak ni Pura Villanueva Kalaw at lola ni Katrina na si Maria Kalaw Katigbak, ang ikatlong babaeng senador ng bansa. Your great-grandmother influenced her children, obviously, and the eldest was Maria Kalaw. And so, how did your great-grandmother influence her daughter and your grandmother, Maria Kalaw Katigbak?
Well, she was the eldest of the brood, and I guess the most heavily influenced by Pura. With my Lola, I just see her from my lens, okay? My Lola was always very fiercely independent also. And I remember growing up, my mom telling me as a woman or as a kid, as a girl, that, Katrina, you don't need like any man. Parang you can do whatever you want as a woman. And I think this was carried on from Pura to Maria to my mom, Josefina, and me. Definitely that strength of you do, and not because you're well off or whatever, but there was always a practice of, if you can do it, you do it yourself. Don't be lazy, don't be idle. You have to always continue doing it yourself if you can. So I saw that in my Lola because she was always so industrious, and I saw that in my mom, and my mom taught that to me. Like, just never be idle. Like, your mind or your hands should always be busy doing something. And I think that's what Pura, as a trait, as a family trait, has given or has shown my Lola Maria from when she was young. Always be industrious and educate and aspire for higher education.
It's not just that, no? Well, of course, that's a very important part of what your Lola inherited from your great-grandmother. But what's interesting here is si Maria Kalaw Katigbak also became a beauty queen. No?
Yeah.
These days there are a lot of feminists who are against pageants. They think women are being exploited and treated like cattle at an auction, etc. No, so may ganong perspective, no. But your ancestors, grandmother and great grandmother, obviously did not see a conflict between being an intellectual, being someone respected for her mind and her character, etc. But at the same time being admired, no, for publicly admired and even displayed, no, for their beauty, no.
Yeah, I don't think you can compare today's beauty pageants with the ones that, they're not gawked. There's no swimsuit talaga really, it's something else now. But I remember my Lola and my mom saying that during those times, the Carnival Queen and the Miss Philippines, it's not only looks, but you really also had to have the right connection, the right family, the upbringing, the grades, even the grades, the schooling. So it was really all. It wasn't just looks and how you look in a gown or something. So yeah, it was a very high honor then.
Well, that's interesting, no? Kasi a lot of beauty pageant contestants still aspire to that. I mean, that's why there's that question and
Question and
answer
answer.
portion, di ba?
Yes.
And they're supposed to have some kind of advocacy then, aside from being beautiful. They're supposed to have show
Yes,
character.
I'm glad to see that the winners of the beauty contest now really are the ones with, brains and passion for an advocacy. It's not really, and the ones who really don't are just really weeded out. I think you can tell.
Bilang isang suffragist, manunulat, asawa at ina, pinatunayan ni Pura Villanueva Kalaw na ang babae ay may mahalagang papel sa paghubog ng lipunan at hindi hadlang ang kasarian sa kakayahang mamuno, maglingkod at magbago ng mundo.
I think their legacy really for the public is really the women's right to vote. I think that's the big thing for Pura. I think she was really one of the women who made it happen. It would have taken much longer, I think, if she wasn't so vocal about it. That I think would be the big legacy for women today.
Do you think they would be proud of the situation of Filipino women today?
Good question. I think so. You know why? We have a healthy respect for women leaders here in the Philippines, healthier than most countries in the world.
Yeah.
So in that case, in those terms, I think they'll be very proud of how the women have put their foot, have gotten their place in the table in guiding the Philippines. Now, whether we're on the right track or whether the women now, that's another story. I'm not sure how they would feel about it, but at the very least, the women's voices in the Philippines will be heard as represented by our politicians who are women. I think they would. I think they'd be so surprised, frankly, that we're this advanced while the US can't even elect a woman. Right? And they're supposed to be land of the, equality and all that. They can't even get, that done.
Ang mga tulad ni Pura Villanueva Kalaw ay bahagi ng mahabang tradisyon ng mga Pilipinang lumaban para sa karapatan at kalayaan. Sa hanay na ito, kabilang din si Melchora Aquino o mas kilala natin bilang Tandang Sora. Tulad ng mga suffragist, pinatunayan ni Tandang Sora na ang tapang at pagmamahal sa bayan ay hindi nasusukat sa kasarian. Sa kauna-unahang Women's Museum sa bansa, sa Barangay Tandang Sora mismo sa Quezon City, ipinaliwanag ng museum curator na si Sandra Torrijos na mahalagang kilalanin ang mga naging ambag ng mga kababaihan sa ating kasaysayan. Ano yung nais niyong i-highlight dito? Anong talagang pinagmamalaki niyo dito sa museum na to?
Unang-una ay yung kadakilaan ni Tandang Sora. Yung kanyang mga virtues na naging basihan ko para sa museum na ito. No? Isa sa mga basihan ng konsepto ay yung kanyang katapatan, pagkapwa-tao, pagmamahal sa tao, pagtulong sa kapwa. Kasi nung panahon niya, naging member siya ng katipunan at siya pag may mga katipuneros na nagmi-meeting sa kanyang lugar, pinapakain niya, pinapabaunan pa niya. Parang NGO na wala naman siyang sweldo, kanyang sariling kita or paghihirap ang pinamimigay niya. At ang kanyang katapangan at ang higit sa lahat ay ang kanyang pagmamahal sa bayan. Kaya nga sinabi niya na kung siya may siyam na buhay, ito'y ilalaan pa rin niya sa bayan. Pagdating sa suffrage, talagang women in action yan. No? So napakalaga ng suffrage dito sa ating bayan, na makaboto, magkaroon ng say, magkaroon ng boses sa mga kababaihan in all spheres of our lives. No? Because we're part of the population. Ano yung gusto niyong bigyang pansin dito sa women's suffrage movement? What in particular about it do you want people to know about? Ito'y pinaghirapan ng maraming kababaihan, pawis, katalinuhan nila, material things, talagang pinaglaban nila ito. So, wag nating sayangin ang leksyon ng ating kasaysayan. Gamitin natin itong
lakas na ito. Actually, ang suffrage ay isang lakas, isang power to be able to have a decision. Pero pag-iisipan natin maigi ito, pag-aaralan ng mga issues, at hindi natin ito ipagbibili. Dahil ito'y boses natin. Kasi pag pinagbili mo ito, parang pinagbili mo na rin yung sarili mo. Yun ay hindi tama.
This episode was produced by the team of Yu Marianga and Aubrey de los Reyes. Supervised by Criselda Caringa, Arla Fabella, and Bernice Bukaw. This was edited by J.R. Magtoto and hosted by me, Howie Severino. Thank you, Podmates, for listening and watching until the very end of this podcast. Alam nyo na, nakakatalino ang mahabang attention span. Don't forget to like and subscribe and binge watch our past episodes too. Until the next pod, mabuhay kayo at ingat lagi.